Hey guys, it's CS Joseph with csjoseph.life. Do another episode for season 23. This is episode 6, or How to Parent ESFJs, also known as the supporter type, and according to this community, the cavalier type, because they are the most cavalier of all of the types. So, congratulations, you're now a parent, and you are parenting an ESFJ. Of course, you probably had a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out what type they were, because ESFJs often, just like all the other types, children present as their subconscious and not actually their ego. And it's kind of interesting because my next door neighbor, they have a ESFJ granddaughter, and she presents as an INTP all the time. It was actually pretty difficult for me to type her when I was going through that entire process. ESFJ, you have an affiliative child, and it's like, okay, hold on, what do I do? Well, I'll be honest, most parents don't actually ask, what do I do when it comes to ESFJs, because ESFJs are perfect little angels who don't do anything wrong, because they're so self-sacrificing. They serve everybody else around them, even their families, their adults, etc. They serve so much that oftentimes parents take full advantage of how often their ESFJ child serves and is constantly serving. Sometimes those ESFJ children are treated like servants. And I wish this was not the case amongst parents who have ESFJs. Why? Well, this teaches their ESFJ child to basically be a doormat before their time, before they're already at risk of being a doormat for too long, which is really frustrating, and I honestly don't agree with that. I really don't. Now, granted, if you have a lot of children and whatnot, yeah, it's nice to have your other children step up and do chores or washing the dishes, laundry, those kinds of things. But seriously, don't take advantage of your ESFJ child. Really, really don't. And here's the other thing. The more you have your ESFJ serve you in their youth, the more they will be bitter and hateful towards you in their adulthood. And that's just not good. If anything, you need to prepare them to serve other people, not you, basically. So if they're an ESFJ girl, you would have to basically teach her in the ways of how to please a man, basically, because girls are not taught that in this society, which causes a lot of problems. Like, for example, women think that it's okay in a monogamous society to put their children above their man. Now, while biologically that's kind of how things should be, that's not how things are in a monogamous society. When you have a monogamous society, women must put their men above their own children. In a poly society, that's not really a thing. And a poly society is more towards biology. But we live in a very interesting Western society, which oftentimes is accused by others of being decadent. Well, monogamy definitely plays its role in that. Because monogamy facilitates the selfishness of everybody, the solipsism of women especially in that particular moment, that innate solipsism. But I'm not saying that solipsism is a bad thing. In my opinion, that solipsism is one of the reasons why our race has survived for so long as a race, and also why our cognition has been able to develop the way it has throughout the eons and the existence of our race as a whole, which is pretty fantastic. So I'm not condemning it, and I'm not condemning women. I'm just saying that there's certain lifestyles that preclude us to behave certain ways. And some of them are beneficial for children, and some of them are not. So people often think monogamy is the most beneficial to children. It's no, not necessarily. Unless, of course, you're living under the roof of a multi-generational home, where you have a very large family and children have full access to a wide variety of psyches around them, so that they can have lots of camaraderie and compatibility with multiple people in their own family, because that will cause them to grow. Why is this important? Well, take men, for example. Women, they mature, sooner than men, certainly. But that's because they're at their sexual peak from 20 to 26. Men aren't at their sexual peak until their late 30s. So if you think about it from that standpoint, of course women are going to develop faster because they have to for the survival of the race. In order for us to have the healthiest biodiversity as well as the healthiest genetics available to us, women need to start producing children and be a lot more sexually active a lot sooner than men. Whereas men need to focus on esteeming themselves and becoming better men, and then via epigenetics, because of all the hard work and the male burden of performance that they have to endure throughout their life as a man, will actually increase the quality of their seed by the time they're in their late 30s. And hopefully by then they've gained additional alpha traits instead of just being solely available to beta traits, which is what women want more so anyway, statistically that is. So why is that? Why is this relevant to ESFJs? The reason why is because ESFJs are so hyper-traditional with everything that ESFJs, out of all of the 16 types, are, they from a cavalier point of view, they are so cavalier that they will force other people to abide by social norms. And even if those social norms don't benefit other people or even benefit themselves. And this is a consistent issue amongst ESFJs all around. And again, I'm not saying I'm against monogamy. I'm just saying if you choose to be monogamous, you have to make sure that there is that particular hierarchy in the home. Man comes first. Women, they're second. Children are third. Animals are fourth. And above the man is the man's life purpose. But every time you have a woman putting her child above her man, she needs to be thrown in the dumpster, quite frankly. I recommend to men that they divorce such a woman, or they move on from such a woman. Or if they are open to a poly lifestyle, I recommend to those men that they take on an additional woman. Because under a monogamy point of view, it is impossible for one woman, to satisfy one man if she's putting other things above him. And biologically, women are supposed to be putting other things above their men, biologically speaking. So if you don't have a poly model, within their own family, which is very prevalent amongst tribal North Africa, South America, as well as anything anywhere near rainforests, also the Aborigines of Australia, especially on the west side. It's very common amongst these cultures. It used to be far more common amongst any culture on this planet, until the Catholic Church instituted monogamy as a way to quell population, because the Malthusians were concerned about overpopulation. The most Malthusian person on the planet right now is actually Bill Gates. Think about that for a second. But when it comes to ESFJs, because they force these social norms, they often are forcing social norms on other people without actually understanding anything about those social norms. And it's really, really frustrating, because an ESFJ at their worst, they can also be insanely elitist about it. And that elitism comes from their extroverted sense and critic, which we've talked about many times prior. So most people just oh, Mr. C.S. Joseph, you're just being an ass. And I'm like, okay, you can judge me an ass as much as you want to, but I'm just telling you the reality. The point is that when it comes to your ESFJ son or your ESFJ daughter, they absolutely need to be aware of these dichotomies, because if you're going to impress upon your son or daughter social norms they will fight for those social norms to the death, all the way till their death. You have to make sure that you're teaching the right thing. Because remember, folks, tradition is the corpse of wisdom. It's not actually wisdom. And oftentimes traditions need to be destroyed. For example, I recently let go of the tradition of having a Christmas tree. And I don't do Christmas trees anymore. Because it's a pagan practice. And I don't want to have anything to do with paganism. I'm not a pagan. I don't live my life that way. And I don't want to engage in pagan practices like having a Christmas tree. Now, most people will balk at that and think I'm crazy. But I'm like, no, I just don't want to deal with it. And furthermore, really, bringing a tree in my house, for one, yeah, it might smell nice for a little bit, but then the needles get everywhere, and it just turns into a big inconvenience. And then I have to pay a lot of money to get it removed, in as much as me paying a lot of money to actually have it in the first place. It's not a tradition that is even sustainable from a time and money management point of view, on top of it being a pagan practice. And my own personal belief system is anti-pagan, so I refuse to participate in anything related to that. As much as many of our other holidays are very pagan, and as much as paganism has been weaved into the Catholic Church, and then the majority of Christianity, the vast majority, 90% I would say, all because of that pagan influence upon the Catholic Church right from the beginning, after Constantine basically usurped the Christian religion, essentially. And through Constantine, the Catholic Church was created. The Roman Catholic Church, the most pagan of them all, and in my opinion also known as the Church of Pergamum, where Satan takes his seat, according to Revelation chapter 2 and 3. But I'm not here to talk to you about eschatology or any of that type of stuff. I'm just trying to point out that over time, people's agendas throughout history have created bullshit traditions, okay, that ESFJs end up adopting, defending, and enforcing in their families for generations. And it needs to stop. It really, really needs to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if parents actually help their ESFJs adopt a system of abandoning tradition, or allowing those ESFJs to create their own traditions, their own standards, their own social norms, right? Based on their own verification as to whether or not something is good or bad, right? With their FE hero. But the problem is that parents nowadays are outsourcing their parenting to so many other people, to the state, to the city, to the local government, to the community, to the au pair, to the babysitter. And oftentimes it's because parents don't have a choice, because the dollar has so little buying power that it's forcing two adults to have to work in order to bring home the bacon to feed their ESFJ child to begin with. And then the ESFJ child is adopting the social norms and the traditions of society, regardless of how well you parent your child anyway. All the more reason to have a multi-generational family under a roof, so you have multiple adults to watch those children, so the breadwinners can go out and win the bread, etc. And then those children are no longer adopting the social norms or the traditions of society, but they are doing so of those of the family, which is what you want. And in fact, it's actually what ESFJs need. They need that the most. And so many people just don't understand that. So, all of this to say, you have to be extremely careful what you teach your ESFJ child, because they are so impressionable, and they are the biggest people pleasers of all the types, that if you teach them one thing and you don't undo it, and trust me, they have SI parent, if you teach them something and you're wrong about it and you find out you're wrong about it later, they will still live their life that way. It is so hard to remove a social norm or a tradition from an ESFJ. It is almost impossible because their SI parent is impressed upon it forever and ever. This is one of the reasons why SP types love being in sexual relationships with ESFJs, because ESFJs are so self-sacrificing and have so much fortitude and have so much endurance that those ESFJs will always stay. They will always stick around, regardless of how abusive SPs can get. And don't get me wrong, every single one of the 16 types can be abusive. But when it comes to ESFJs, they're the ones, like ISFJs, who can take the most abuse. And that's a problem. That's a serious problem. And the types that end up dishing out the most abuse, well, you know what's interesting about that? ISFPs. ISFPs and ESTPs, those two types especially, end up dishing out the most, at least physical or verbal abuse. I would say probably more physical abuse. And ESFJs and ISFJs end up having to take it from those two types. And ESFJ, their golden pair, is the ISFP. But here's the problem. If you've taught your ESFJ child the wrong thing, and they're such a people pleaser, they're always looking for external validation, that if they're getting that validation from FI hero of an ISFP who happens to be physically abusive, they're still going to stay in the relationship. And it's not necessarily going to be the ESFJ's fault. It's going to be your fault. Yeah, because you're being a bad parent. Because you don't understand what your child needs, right? Or you never understood what your child needs. And perhaps it may not be your fault because you were so poor, because the society has destroyed the dollar's buying power, that there was no adults around in the home to be able to take care of those children, right? Well, it's kind of interesting how that works, isn't it? It's very interesting how that works. Why? Well, because, think about it. In a monogamous relationship, you end up having the nuclear family. And believe me, I'm actually against the nuclear family. Completely against it. I'm against it because children don't have psychological variety from adults in their life with which their minds can benefit from. Nuclear families also have less resources than multi-generational families or poly families. They have a lot less resources. Psychological resources, this also includes monetary resources, time resources. They have less resources. And because of that, nuclear families end up having smaller amounts of children, usually an average of just one to replace the parents. So parents end up, having just one child, so a nuclear family, I think the average size is like 4 right now. It's 3 to 4. In some cases, the nuclear family does not replace themselves. In a lot of cases they do, but they don't often have more than just them, based on recent statistics that I was reading. I'm sure the Malthusians out there are super excited about that because overpopulation is going to destroy the world. No, it's not. The population is going to cap out at 11 billion. You'll see. Watch the documentaries on that. And that's also part due to the Malthusian influence within society, I will admit. But the thing is, though, the earth is quite plentiful. It can handle so many more of us than we even realize. Not only that, if people were focusing on developing technologies for everyone's general welfare and well-being on a regular basis, we literally have the ability to have unlimited energy right now. We have the ability we could streamline food production with certain standards in such a way where we wouldn't have a limited food supply. We actually have this capability. Imagine space colonies, right? Where we control the weather 100% and we're growing food inside of these space colonies where we don't have to deal with the disasters of the earth, like a hurricane or a locust swarm. You see what I'm saying, folks? it's getting to a point where humanity, very soon, if not already, when we already have the technology, we already have the ideas, we just have to implement them. But we're getting to the point where anything that the earth throws at us, we can deal with. It's not a problem anymore. Like, we're outgrowing the earth. We're outgrowing these issues, which is interesting. Because oftentimes man would have to be, going against the elements to that end. Well, not really that big of a deal. Nice canyon, huh? So, you got to be real careful with ESFJs. Now, let's talk a little bit more about nature versus nurture. And by the way, guys, this is assuming you've watched previous ESFJ lectures. So if you're watching this and you're getting confused about certain things I'm saying, go to the YouTube channel and click playlists and click ESFJ and watch everything there. So, nature versus nurture. So, a person's psychology, a person's psyche, a person's personality type, that's their soul, basically. Well, that only makes 60% of the equation. And every human being out there with their nature which is internal. The external is the nurture. Every time you make a decision, every time you say something, every time you read something, when you're taking in information and you're exporting decision making, or you're taking in decisions and you're exporting information, this is literally how our brains work. This is the difference between extroverted and introverted perception functions, as well as extroverted and introverted decision-making functions. Okay? Inputs and outputs, binary inputs and outputs directly out of our brain, which is basically a big computer, and we end up creating nurture. External nurture, internal nurture. External nature, internal nature. The ESFJ type is in nature. It's one of the 16 natures for human beings. It is their ego. And then it has 4 sides of their mind, which is the 4 natures contained within that person, right? So those are the 4 natures, okay, contained within each. But their primary nature, their main nature, is the ESFJ, and that's why we call them ESFJs, because that's their ego, okay? Well, nurture, every time you as a parent are doing anything, your child is watching you and you are effectively nurturing them. It's kind of like when a parent starts cussing in front of their children, and then you hear the old phrase, do as I say, not as I do. Here's how I would approach that. I'd tell them, you can cuss as much as you want when you're older, but not right now. You're too young. See, children are more willing to accept that than, those perfect parents trying to be so perfect, potentially INFJ or ENFJ parents, or maybe SFJ parents, those FJ parents who are like, oh, you can't cuss ever. Yeah, no, there's this thing called adulthood. No thanks. That's not going to happen. That's like telling your child, oh, you can't have sex ever. Okay, no. That's literally Mark Wahlberg's portrayal of Cade Yeager in Transformers 4, Age of Extinction, and his daughter Tessa. And he just can't believe that she has a boyfriend. Bro, do you not understand how hypergamous women are? Do you not get it? Come on, bro. So, and as alpha as they made her boyfriend look in that film, he ended up being a beta, which was really frustrating. And although Mark Wahlberg's character started off pretty beta, he kind of ended up pretty alpha by the end of the movie. A little weird how Hollywood likes to spin things sometimes, So, nature versus nurture. Everything you do, everything you say, do, think, read, whatever, creates nurture. And nurture, as a result, is what happens to people on a regular basis. Everything changes with nurture. So, how to parent really becomes how to nurture. How do you nurture an ESFJ child? So, childhood, or a person being a child, has two separate phases. The first phase is when you're raising a child, and the second phase is when you're teaching a child. Now, raising a child is basically pre-adolescence. Teaching is post-adolescence. A lot of parents don't understand this when it comes to parenting children. It's actually very frustrating as to how much, they just don't understand about it. So, an ESFJ child is something known as TI inferior. TI inferior at its worst, especially in adulthood, especially when they're entitled, and they're usually entitled because children get entitled because they don't know their fathers, or their fathers are weak betas, or their fathers aren't around. So, or due to divorce, etc., because women in this society have the absolute power to decide if a man gets to be a parent or a father at all, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But because women have that decision-making power, they are ultimately deciding and have the ability to decide at any moment if a child, basically, if a child is going to be entitled or not in their adulthood. You can't really ask a mother, okay, list all the strengths and weaknesses of your child. See, they could try, but they don't really do a good job when compared to asking their father, hey, what are all the strengths and weaknesses of your child? See, fathers understand that. It's because women are supposed to be giving that unconditional love to their children, but fathers don't. They don't. Fathers understand their strengths and weaknesses, and it's the father's job to get them to build their strengths and work through their weaknesses so that child is ready for adulthood and even beyond adulthood in a lot of cases. But feminism has no respect for this, and then your ESFJ child is going to end up serving the feminine primary social order within society. And as a result of that, those ESFJs are going to continue the system and continue serving this bullshit world system within this society, and they are going to continue to create fatherlessness because it's fair. Well, their awareness of fairness, because fairness is so important to a crusader type, and it's so important to an ESFJ, that they need to be reminded that an eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. You guys out there who are all complaining about millennials, complaining about Gen Z, complaining about alpha generation being entitled, the reason why is fatherlessness. They don't have fathers. It's a fact. If you don't like the entitlement, then you need to change the system. Here's in my opinion, the number one way to change the system. Allow for paper abortion. If a woman gets pregnant in the same amount of time, in the time frame that she has the ability to get an abortion, you allow men to do a paper abortion. They have that choice too. If women get the choice to do that, where people would claim that they're potentially committing murder, well, men should get the choice of absolving themselves legally of any financial or parental responsibility towards that child. I imagine far more women out there would be way more responsible with their hypergamous nature when it comes to sexuality as a result, right? And of course, you could have little extenuating circumstances involving rape, etc. But you have to remind these ESFJs that this society is not actually fair, even though they claim that they need these social constructs like courts always siding with mothers, as fair. Well, they're not fair. It's completely unfair. And that's the problem. ESFJ men, not just women, I'm not begging on ESFJ women here, it's both. They end up defending the feminine primary social order. They end up defending the system that creates fatherlessness. And the whole point of these parenting lectures is to destroy fatherlessness. Fatherlessness is why we have these entitled generations. Fatherlessness is why we are losing society every single day, and we are on the path to collapse. And this society, the United States of America, will collapse very soon. Mark my words, it's coming. And it's a lot sooner than you think. A lot sooner. Almost like a lion with eagle wings. And its eagle wings get ripped off. and then it's forced to stand on its hind legs. I think that's Daniel chapter 8. You might want to check out that prophecy. A lion with eagle wings. What's a lion? You know, Lion of Judah, Israel, eagle wings, the influence of an eagle, the United States of America. You might want to look at that. It's a little weird. You know, people don't like that I inject biblical prophecy in every now and then, but, you know, I am any hero, and I love me some symbolism, regardless of the source. I do like Hindu symbolism. I like symbolism in Islam. I study them all. So did Carl Jung. I mean, the collective unconscious, also known as extrovert intuition, which was his chief achievement, his discovery of that cognitive function, that cognitive sense, and all the symbolism that it brings. I wouldn't be talking to you here and now if he didn't study all of those symbols, and that's what I do. I study symbols. Kind of like Daniel Jackson from Stargate. If you want to understand Carl Jung, look at Daniel Jackson. Seriously. That's a little weird, but, and I am a sci-fi nerd, you know. So all you sci-fi nerds out there who love you some Stargate, Carl Jung is definitely Daniel Jackson. So, and I think Daniel Jackson may also be an ESFJ. Interesting. So, going on further, you got to understand that, like, the society is very screwed up, but it's going to be the ESFJs who end up becoming the culture carriers of society more than anybody else, men or women. These are our firefighters. These are our secretaries. They work at the public utility district. They work at City Hall. They work for Central Intelligence. They are soldiers. They're in the military. They jump out of helicopters. They're the police officers. They're the enforcers, right? These are ESFJs. This is what they do, right? They become the culture carriers and protectors and the guardians of society. And they do it in a very cavalier way. Sometimes to the point where it's like, oh, you're violating social norms. Therefore, you don't have any rights. I'm going to take away your freedom and I'm going to take away your choice because you're violating social norms. Social norms that we all agreed to follow. No, ESFJs. You didn't even agree to follow the social norms. You had them foisted upon you. And it's probably because your parents were outsourcing your training as a child, your raising and teaching as a child, to other sources. Or your parents were already agents of society, agents of the matrix, and forcing those social norms upon you. And you adopted them because the most impressionable, people-pleasing of all the types are ESFJs. And because of that, they end up becoming loyal to social constructs that pre-exist. It's like prejudging. It's like prejudice. The same thing that causes racism, the same thing that causes prejudice, which is ignorance, by the way, that's the cause. It's the same thing that causes ESFJs to prejudge a social norm such that they adopt that social norm without even first understanding that social norm. How is that possible? It's because their FE and their SI functions are a lot further up than their TI. And it may be towards their midlife that they realize that those social norms they adopted were actually fake, were actually arbitrary, were actually lies, because they don't take the time until then to verify. That's a problem. That's very scary. You don't want that, guys. You really don't want that. No one wants that. Absolutely nobody. But it's extremely common. And then you have these people out there, these ESFJs who are so elitist about it. It's really, really annoying. Because they're being super elitist and forcing you to abide by a social norm they adopted without verifying. And this is the worst form of an ESFJ. And this is literally as a result of bad parenting of an ESFJ. So, how to avoid this outcome? Here's how. First thing is first. When raising an ESFJ, first things first, you have to focus all of your effort and all of your attention on TI inferior, constantly. Now, a child's brain has the highest neuroplasticity. It has the ability to adapt. And if you want to make them strong and be able to endure your ESFJ, which they will because they have SI parent, which is awesome, you don't really have to worry about that right now. You have to worry about whether or not your ESFJ is intelligent enough to question everything, including authorities, including social norms. Because remember, ESFJs are affiliative. They will side with the majority. They will side with the people that agree on something. And it's extremely difficult for an ESFJ to disagree with something. They're the most agreeable of all the types. So you have to go out of your way to develop their TI inferior so that your ESFJ is not afraid to disagree with people. Because ESFJs, especially ESFJ children, are so afraid to disagree that they will allow people to rape them. Because if they think in their head, after their rapist has convinced them that everyone believes that it's okay, they will end up agreeing with the rapist. It is so easy. I've seen it happen so many times in my coaching practice when it comes to ESFJs. And they're literally gaslit into believing that being raped by a family member or a friend is okay. Even if they're teenagers. Even if they are in college. This is a thing, people. They're extremely weak in this area. And then they defend their abusers. It's especially bad with ENTPs and INTPs. And they're probably worse. But it's still bad with the ESFJ. The ISFJ, out of all of the Crusaders, is usually the only one that can say no in those situations, because they're not going to develop Stockholm Syndrome because they have FE parent. Where FE parent is like, this is socially unacceptable and I don't care what you say. But the other Crusaders, it can be twisted, very twisted. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. So, as a result, you got to watch out. Focus all of your efforts in building their TI inferior. Raising your ESFJ means challenging that TI inferior at all times. Anytime your ESFJ child speaks, ask them, well, how do you know that? You have to challenge their TI. Also, when you're making a decision that may involve the ESFJ, ask them, well, what do you think about this? Give them their day in court. Give them a voice. That doesn't mean you have to listen to them. It doesn't mean you have to go with your child's suggestion. Of course not. But allow them to have a seat at the table to speak. And then through that, if you refuse their thoughts after they've spoken, guess what's going to happen? They may get upset at you for a little bit. They may say that, I hate you, or whatever, or you never listen to me. But what it does is it teaches their introverted sensing that over time that maybe they should be more sharper in their thinking, so that when they share their thoughts next time, there's a higher chance of you agreeing with them because they offered an honest and intelligent answer instead of something that was lazy and not really well thought out. ESFJs, oftentimes Wayfarer types, ESFPs, INTJs, ENTJs, ISFPs, especially Wayfarer women, are often derided and demonized for being the dumb blonde type, right? But it's the ESFJ women who are considered easy, super easy. You just say one nice thing about them to their face, and maybe even in front of others, and their panties drop, right? Do you really want that for your daughter? No, you don't want that for your daughter. So as a result, It's your responsibility as this daughter's parent, this ESFJ daughter's parent, to question everything she says at all times and ask her, why does she think that? Get her to defend her points. How do you know that? Why do you think that? What do you think about this? How did you come to that conclusion? You have to question her. You have to question your son all the time. And by questioning them before and doing it pre-adolescence, before their ego is fully formed, before it's fully developed, before all those neural pathways are built in their brains, at that point, they will become super intelligent. They will spend so much time thinking about everything, and they will literally be thinking before they act. They will literally verify everything. And by verifying everything, they will realize that the social norms, the traditions of the family or society are not important at all when compared to what's true or false. It's so important because in your family, this child will not have any success, will not have any privileges, will not have any snacks, will not be able to play any video games or watch television unless they can prove what they're thinking, unless they can meet that challenge, unless they are so well practiced at what they think and that they've spent a long time thinking about everything that they are able to meet your challenge as the parent. And eventually you'll see TI aspirational starting to appear before they hit 13 years old, before they hit adolescence. This is especially important with daughters because daughters develop faster, especially now because female hormones are so screwed up that they're having their periods so much sooner. Well, it's because you're drinking tap water. Stop that. Do you realize birth control hormones are not filtered out of tap water, right? You might want to think about that. You know, I'm sure that fluoride is doing really good. Oh yeah, it's really great for your teeth, guys, but it'll just give you cancer too. I'm sure the Malthusians really enjoy the fact that the ESFJs out there have adopted the social norm of putting fluoride into water. Yeah, parents of ESFJs, I lay that at your feet. People are getting cancer because of you. People are getting sick and dying because of you. Because you're not raising your ESFJs properly. Because these ESFJs, who are so supportive, end up supporting people who create a UN Agenda 21, or UN Agenda ID 2020, or UN Agenda 2030, which Jordan Peterson was about. You might want to think about that. You really might want to think about that. So, you have to go out of your way to do this. If you don't do this, like I said, they will defend all the social norms and the bullshit traditions of this society to their death. They will give their life for it. Okay? Because you did not develop their thinking. You did not challenge them enough. It is written, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man to another. So, what does that mean? When it comes to your child, your ESFJ child, the more challenge you bring to their TI, the more intelligent they become, because they will gain the experience, and then they will think and process things a lot more and more than anybody else, so that they know for a fact that what they are saying is true. So that when you challenge them again, they will meet that challenge, they will pass that challenge, and then you can reward them, be it with television or snack or video games, etc. Right? Those kinds of challenges. It's very important. So, a lot of people just do not understand the consequences of their actions. The affiliative is out there, and ESFJs control the affiliative. They run the affiliative. They start the affiliative. Remember, affiliative people feel entitled to authority because they're like, well, if I'm a respecter of authority, that means one day I can gain authority. or because I'm always trying to do the right thing all the time, that means I deserve authority over you because you don't do the right thing. And they elect themselves an authority because they focus on doing the right thing. And they use doing the right thing as an excuse to give them authority, regardless of whether or not they have the performance to back up whether or not they should be an authority. It's sick. It's twisted. And every ESFJ out there does this. I was working with a business recently, and there is this ESFJ vice president who's on staff, and he's married, and his wife's in California, and he went to another state to be the vice president for this other company because he hasn't moved his business there. And not even the first week of being on the job, he's doing that ESFJ thing where it's like, hey, I've been here a long time, or hey, I'm the big kahuna. And because I'm the big kahuna, guess what? Hey, if you sleep with me, I'll help you get a promotion, right? That's bullshit. But this is literally how entitled these people get. They get so entitled because my authority, because I'm doing the right thing. And then because of that, they become corrupt. Corrupt like that ESFJ vice president who went to the most attractive woman in the entire company, had lunch with her, wined and dined her on the job, and was informatively, not directly, informatively beating around the bush, propositioning her for sex in exchange for promotion. This happens all the time. This is actually extremely common among ESFJ men in the workplace. It's common. This is common. Do you want your son doing that? Is that what you want? Is that what you should be doing? Really? No, I don't think so. See, you parents need to grow up first if you're going to expect your children to grow up, right? There's so much more. There's so much more to this. You must challenge that TI inferior. You must go out of your way. I don't care if it creates hatred in your child towards you, because when you attack somebody or go after someone's inferior function, it creates hatred in them. However, their brains have such high neuroplasticity at their stage of life, they let it go. Kind of like, how long does a cat hold a grudge? 18 hours? You see what I'm saying? The children will let the grudge go. They'll completely let go of it after a while because they will see, especially in their late 20s, just how important you challenging their thinking was. Because again, ESFJs will adopt traditions and social norms and enforce them without even verifying whether or not those traditions or social norms were valid in the first place. That's why churches are filled with SFJ types, especially ESFJs, because those ESFJs are constantly in this particular situation. And it's really annoying. They're going to church for a belief system that they haven't even verified themselves. That's utterly pathetic. And ESFJs, they're my conflict type, so we have the most conflict between each other. It's always, if you're an introvert, you go for the other introverted type of the same quadra, or if you're an extrovert, it's the extroverted type of the same quadra that you're in, and that's your conflict type. So ESFJs, they naturally hate my guts. That's also why ESFJs are the lowest represented in the people that I've coached. They're the lowest represented in terms of the people who have taken my personality test. They're the lowest represented people within this community. It's because they just naturally hate my guts. But that's okay. If you are their parent, they don't know that you're talking to me, right? They don't know any of that. So, as a result, keep that in mind. Seriously, keep that in mind. It's really important. Just take what I'm saying and do it. Challenge their TI. How do you know that? Why do you think that? What do you think? constant with questions every single day to make their TI big. I don't care if it creates hatred of them towards you. You are their parent. You are not their friend. Got it? And then all of a sudden adolescence happens. Hopefully you did a good job. Hopefully you challenge their TI. Hopefully they think before they act. Hopefully they verify everything, the social norms, the traditions around them. Verify the things that people say to them because, they could be convinced and end up having loyalty towards their rapist or their abuser. Hopefully you got their TI to the point where they know what's true or false. And they're able to verify everything. And you've taught them, trust what people say, but always verify. Hopefully you've done this. Because as soon as adolescence hits, their TI inferior is no longer accessible to you as the parent. It's over. And you're no longer raising your child, you're now teaching your child. Teaching. You've switched to teaching. They're adolescent now. And teaching, adolescence is all about developing your child's parent function. Their parent function, which helps them develop their personal responsibility, and hopefully you will do this or else they will have quarter-life crisis. Quarter-life crisis, which is especially common amongst men, because they don't have their fathers around. They don't have examples of the mature masculine in this society because the mature masculine has been destroyed by feminism within this society because parents have been okay with that for so long because everyone's so selfish with their bullshit nuclear family setup that children are being harmed constantly psychologically as a result. Based on all these things, we have some bigger issues. Okay, we have a lot bigger issues going on. So, what are those issues? How do we deal with them? Teaching. You got to teach your child to be personally responsible. You got to teach your ESFJ to be personally responsible. You have to teach them that hard work is more important than talent for an SI parent. You have to teach them that they need to endure, that have fortitude, to persevere, right? James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. Consider it all joys, my brothers, when you encounter suffering in your life, because it will build within you steadfastness and perseverance, so that you can be complete and lacking nothing in life. Think about that. Perseverance is everything to an SI user. You have to teach their SI parent that hard work, there is no easy way out. There is no get rich quick. There is no any of these things. It's all about hard work. Okay? And you have to teach them this. Well, how do you teach them? Well, you make them do things. You force them to do things they don't want to do. You make them fast. If you see them playing video games a lot, take them away for a month or two. If they're eating too much food, make them fast. Very, very important. But here's the problem. You can't just directly go to the SI parent in your teenager. They'll hate you for it. Just like you can't go directly for their TI inferior. In fact, you can't even go directly for their ego, because their ego is finally theirs. And traditional social engineering methods will have to be employed when they are an adolescent, because they're thinking like an adult, or beginning to think like an adult. Beginning that entire process. So, based on that, you have to go in a completely different attack vector, psychologically speaking, when it comes to your ESFJ child. Based on that, so go for their extroverted sensing critic. And you have to make it all about their personal performance. If they're not performing well, complain. Be like, wow, you'd say things like, why do you think this would make me comfortable right now? Why do you think I want this? Why do you think these marks at school are a good job? Why can't you pay your own insurance? Why can't, you have to question their personal performance at all times for ESFJ because they're SE critic. And by attacking their SE critic or challenging their SE critic while they're adolescents through cognitive orbit, it will actually empower their introverted sensing parent. And they will end up developing habits, routines, healthy habits, healthy routines, healthy processes, healthy systems that will literally cause them to be more personally responsible, because you are questioning their performance the entire time during their adolescence. And then by questioning their performance, they will develop those habits that guarantees top performance, peak performance, because you're questioning their performance. And they just want the validation and the acceptance of their parents, but if their parents are questioning their performance, they're going to feel invalidated. So as a result, they're going to have to adapt with their SI parent and create habits and routines on their own so that their parents are no longer questioning their personal performance. This will increase your child's wisdom. This will increase their ability to perform naturally with their SE critic. It will also help them increase their healthy habits and give them the ability to persevere and endure all hardship. And that is the best gift that you can give your ESFJ. And now they're verifying everything and they're being personally responsible. And as a result, they are very equipped to get through their quarter-life crisis. Quarter-life crisis exists when a person's parent function is underdeveloped. And a parent function is only developed via the critic function being challenged during adolescence. It's the only way. All right? That's how they develop their parent function. And if you're doing your job during their adolescence, your child will be personally responsible, such that they will not have a quarter-life crisis. Midlife crisis comes from when a person's inferior function or subconscious is not developed. But if you are raising your child properly and challenging their inferior function on a regular basis, guess what? They will get to the point where they're not afraid of what they think anymore. They're not afraid of not submitting to authorities because those authorities aren't true, because they're verifying those authorities, those traditions, those social norms. They're not afraid to disagree. They're not afraid to say no. They're not afraid to engineer their own systems and adopt other systems that they know are better. They are not afraid to stop being supportive to their abusers, right? All because you went out of your way to develop their inferior function when you are raising your child, pre-adolescence. And based on this, because they don't have that fear and they have that courage, they will develop their subconscious such that they will completely avoid having midlife crisis. Midlife crisis won't even happen to your child. And they will be able to take on any issue that life throws at them. 3-quarter life crisis, that's where a person's wisdom exists. And 3-quarter life crisis, again, if you did your job during adolescence, they would have gained the wisdom there to handle their 3-quarter life crisis. And then final life crisis, was your child's life meaningful? And you're already dead at this point because they're dying at this point. Was your child's life meaningful? Did they actually leave a better impact on this earth than when they came? Did you? Right? All of these things are important. And all of these things directly translate back to how they were parented. And if you're not handling that properly, well, then it's a serious, serious problem. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Don't give up. And don't forget, too, when it comes to 3-quarter life crisis and final life crisis, sometimes people have a hard time getting through those without their children. You're going to want your ESFJ child around when it's time for you to have your 3-quarter life crisis or your final life crisis. Trust me, you're going to want that. Well, you better raise them properly. Because if you don't raise them properly, not only are you screwing them, you're screwing yourself, and you're screwing society, and you're effectively guaranteeing that fatherlessness will continue to be the standard of Western society and ultimately the world. And the mature masculine is dying and will be cast out. And then because of your inept parenting efforts and parenting your ESFJ, we will end up having a new societal norm known as open cuckoldry as a new norm that will be completely normal and accepted among society across the entire planet. And just imagine how horrible those generations are going to be when it happens. I tell you the truth, the time has come, and it is right now, that we need to turn the hearts of children towards their fathers and the hearts of fathers to their children. Otherwise, folks, I'm telling you, our race will be facing utter destruction. Society will collapse, and we will lose everything. And then it will turn into anarchy, and then the SPs will take over. And there will be these big-time tribes. You'll have Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan all over again, right? Imagine how many people those people raped, right? Yeah. Thousands upon thousands of women. A new woman twice, 3 times a day. Genghis Khan raped that many women. I have his genes in me right now. There's a reason for that. Do you really want that anarchy? Well, you need to parent your ESFJs properly so we don't have that anarchy, okay? Otherwise, they're going to adopt those traditional social norms that they don't even verify and force everybody else to live by them. Pathetic. You don't want that for your child, and we don't want that for our future, the future of this entire world. And I don't care if you're in the Middle East, I don't care if you're in the West, I don't care if you're in the East or the South or wherever you are. This shadow definitely is cast upon all of us unless we can make these decisions to properly parent our children in this manner through Jungian parenting. Here's another reason. As a result of us parenting our children properly, it is everybody's responsibility, and I've said this before, but it is everyone's responsibility to parent each other. Sometimes you have to parent adults. Sometimes you have to parent other people's children. Doesn't matter. It's everyone's responsibility. It is our job as human beings to challenge each other. As iron sharpens iron, so does one man to another. Challenge other human beings. And by putting them in challenge, if they're strong enough to meet their challenge, or anytime you challenge, you're giving them an opportunity for growth. You're giving them an opportunity for strength. So by parenting other people, especially with our parenting functions, because that's what I'm doing with you folks now, I'm parenting you with my TI parent, right? It is our responsibility to parent everyone. If we don't parent everyone, well, again, anarchy is our future. You must go out of your way to challenge other people. Challenge them on right versus wrong. Challenge them on good versus bad. Challenge them on true versus false. You must challenge them on what's wise, what is unwise, and do it consistently for the sake of our entire future and everything and everyone that we actually are and everything that we hold dear. Because if you do not do this, we will lose society. And folks, it starts with the ESFJ. They are starters after all. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please leave a comment below. We really appreciate it. We're very thankful for all of you. And thank you for being part of this community and helping us turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. So thank you very much. I love you all, and I'm very grateful for everything that you've done for us. With that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight.